All right. So we are here. It's going to be a little bit interesting. We're getting some curveballs thrown our way, but, we run with this. So today is the last day of the Convention of Heroes being put on by Superhero Fiction. And we are actually here to talk about adapting work into graphic novels or into comic books. And it just so happens that Amanda here, Amanda
yes.
here is actually my partner in crime, and we have a project to talk about. She is going to be our expert because she is going to walk us through some of this process, and we can talk about where I screwed up every step along the way. So everyone's going to be able to learn from my mistakes. So Amanda, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, hello, I'm Amanda Call. I have been running my own webcomic called Age of Night for about 13 years. So I'm a self-published comic creator. But I also did go to school for comics. I have a degree in sequential art, so I know a lot about how comics get made by people other than myself.
So we're going to dish all the secrets behind Marvel.
Yeah.
No, this is not going to be talking about trying to break into large publishing houses.
No, that's a completely different thing.
And weirdly enough, I don't really think there's a lot of good things to say.
Not particularly. I mean, obviously, I'm an independent creator for a reason. Like, I feel like this is a better way to go, so I'm biased there.
And I'm Jeremy Flagg. I've been writing superhero novels for about 6 years now. I have a superhero series published, 2, about to be 3, 4, 5 series published because I'm crazy. And of course, the reason I got into superheroes was because I was a comic book reader as a kid. So, yes, at some point in time, I realized I have no artistic ability whatsoever when it comes to drawing. And so instead, I sent scripts to Marvel and got delightful rejection letters from Stan Lee. I wish I still had those. Form letter rejections.
Right. Yeah, it's a form letter rejection that they have like a Stan Lee signature on to be encouraging. Right.
But then I wound up going to school for graphic design, so I do have artistic ability. It is just not with a pencil. So, but of course, the whole time I'm writing superheroes, because of this love of where the genre started for me, which it was in comic books. I started reading probably in the mid 80s. My parents used to travel up and down the East Coast and want me to shut up in the car, and they would just say, "Here are comic books." And that's how I learned to read. So they're part of my origin story.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to talk about today is I've known Amanda for 20 years.
20. More than 20, yeah.
We just got old.
Yeah, like 22-ish years.
Yeah. I just met her last week.
Yeah.
So originally we met in a creative writing class, which is kind of ironic here. And then we rediscovered each other. Well, you were doing undergrad and I was doing graduate school. And then at some point, Amanda got me hooked into going to Comic-Cons and being a vendor there and, living the ritzy life of
the artist alley cat life.
Yeah, which is a good way to describe it. But at some point, I realized my goal list isn't going to be complete until I make a comic book. It's on the bucket list. It's a must do. So, like any complete and utter moron, I said, Amanda, you want to make a comic?
And then like an also complete and utter moron, I said, yeah.
So we're going to pick it up from there and start talking about that process right there. But before we even get into that, I kind of have a question for you that
Mhm.
you're going to know way more about than I would.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
what is the overall benefit of being an independent artist versus going the route of uh, Marvel or DC or even larger but smaller publishers?
Right. So when you work for when you work for a publisher, when someone is hiring you to create something for them, there's a lot of different benefits and drawbacks to that. As far as a drawback goes to working for someone else is the fact that they have the creative control. A lot of times they also have a certain amount of copyright ownership, or in the case of someone like Marvel and DC, outright copyright ownership of anything that you create. So you don't have that kind of control over your product or over what happens to it after you have created it. There are some publishers where you still retain creator ownership and creator control, but the editors are still going to have a lot of say over what happens to the final product. And sometimes that can be really good and can really encourage you toward making a better story and a better like final finished piece. And other times it can really compromise your vision because the story you want to tell may be something that they don't believe they can sell. And so they'll tell you, "Oh, well, we have to like tone this down or turn this up." And it may end up not being the thing you really want it to be. And so the advice that most people who have worked as independent creators and then also working for a publisher, the advice that they usually give is, do your best when you're working for a publisher, but don't give them your baby. Don't give them the thing you're the most passionate about, because there's going to be so much compromise in that to get it to market that you're ultimately not going to feel good about it, and it's not going to be the thing you wanted it to be. So that's the big drawback, is the kind of like creative restraints that you have there and the kind of monetary restraints that can have long term if it's something they control forever and you don't. The other side of that, of course, is that a publisher has the resources to get these books into every comic shop in the country and many all over the world that you're not going to be able to do on your own. Like, that is just straight up not something you as an individual are going to be capable of doing. You can get to a lot of readers on your own. You can have a really big reach, especially these days through social media and crowdfunding campaigns. You can reach a lot more people than ever you could as an independent creator. But you personally do not have the resources that a large publisher does. That's the really big benefit of being with a publisher, is that they already have a network of logistics and sales and marketing, and they can get something that you created out everywhere.
So when it comes to actual artistic style,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make the assumption that as an indie, you just get more freedom to kind of go down the road you want to go.
Yeah.
If you were to work for a large publisher, do you get to bring all of that personal style, or is there a certain amount of conformity that's going to happen?
I mean, you're not likely to get hired by a big publisher unless you're already conforming to a certain degree. So, like, someone with an art style like mine is very unlikely to ever be hired by Marvel, because for people who aren't familiar with my work has more of like a Euro comics type style to it, where it's a lot of like a lot of a mix of like clear line and then on the figures, and then like heavily pen and ink rendered backgrounds. It's really not the type of stuff that you see in mainstream comics, like mainstream superhero comics. And so like Marvel and DC just wouldn't hire me. They'd look at my portfolio and be like, "Oh, this is all very nice," but they would never hire me because the way that I draw just does not already fit into the style of work that they like to produce. It's like I could easily get a job with maybe some other publishers who have a wider variety of styles, or who might have a project that they feel fits the style that I have. But it would be very unlikely that I would be hired by one of these places that has a pretty narrow range of the types of styles that they like to produce.
When you were going to school, was there, for lack of a better phrase, was there a how to draw the Marvel way?
Not really. I mean, we learned the fundamentals of like drawing in general, and we learned we learned basic things like perspective and anatomy, and a lot of the resources that we used for that were kind of pointed in that direction. But as long as your drawing was meeting those fundamentals, then past that stylistically, you could basically do whatever you want. But I will say that the further away from those things that you were, the harder of a time the professors and other students had critiquing you effectively, because they were like, I don't understand how to critique this style because it's not what I'm used to. So I'm having a hard time telling you what to do to improve because I don't understand where this style is trying to go. Like if it were trying to go toward Marvel or DC style, like a mainstream superhero style, I would be able to offer feedback for that because I get it. But if you're off doing your own thing stylistically, then sometimes it's harder for people to give you that kind of feedback because they don't necessarily see what your end goal is.
Interesting.
Yeah, I actually had a huge problem with that in school. It drove me nuts all the time, is that I'd have like some professors be like, you need to do this way. And then other professors be like, no, you need to do this that way. And I'm like, you guys just told me totally contradictory things. And eventually I figured out it was because they just weren't sure what my style was supposed to be. And I mean, to be fair, at the time, it wasn't fully developed yet. So, I mean, I didn't even really know what it was supposed to be. So that's a fair thing to be confused about. But it's pretty obvious when someone is driving toward a mainstream superhero style, when that's what they're trying to emulate. And so it's a lot easier to direct them toward that when it's like, oh yeah, I can see that's what you're going for here. So let me give you the critique that'll push you in that direction.
I just randomly stumbled upon a bag of comics from a convention because, you know, you always buy independent created stuff. And some of the artwork in it is like watercolor on canvas to the point where you totally scan the canvas. So I was like, you would never find this in a Marvel DC situation, but this is weirdly interesting visually. So yeah, Marvel and DC, like, you do something well. Very narrow something.
Right. And then also, if you start from that place and you become established, then you're given a lot more freedom. So you're talking about watercolors gave me the idea, just reminded me of like David Mack. So like at this point, David Mack creates all of these like crazy watercolor collage, like text woven throughout the images, like really experimental, beautiful pieces of artwork for comic books that are published by mainstream publishers. But he didn't start that way. Like he didn't start his comic career that way. He started in that more traditional superhero style. And then once he sold a bajillion books and everyone was like, wow, this guy's really great, he was like, cool, now I'm going to do art the way I want to do since you're going to hire me anyway. And they said, okay.
Tom Muller from the Muller Company, Hello Muller, does the new X-Men. And I cannot scream from the rooftop. The story sucks. I truthfully hate it. But not the artwork, the design work is so incredible that I don't need to even look at the pictures. Like, just, I never realized that layout was missing in my life. So, it's funny, the things in comics that speak to us are rarely ever seems to be the same thing. Okay, so like a true noob, I came to you originally wanting to take one of my existing properties and I wanted to turn it into a comic book or have a tie-in. I think it was originally
right. It was like a tie-in story to the Nighthawks universe.
This is going to be a super open question, but is that a viable idea? Like, I know, like, I'm thinking back to like when Heroes was on TV, there was a graphic novel tie-in, there was a web tie-in, there was God only knows what else they tied in. They tied in everything. And for them, with this massive media machine behind them, it worked. I went out and bought the comic right away. For a smaller property, you know, I'm not making millions of dollars. Is there a benefit or a detriment when trying to do something that's tied into an existing universe?
Right. I mean, the benefit, of course, is anytime you already have an established audience, you can bring them with you. And that's true of any new project that you do, is that you already have an audience and you can say, hey, audience, I have this new thing. And not all of them, but a certain percentage of them will go, cool, new thing that you did. We like you. We'll check it out. And having the new thing be a tie-in to the existing thing you have the audience for, then increases that number of people that is likely to check out the new thing because it is like a thing they already like. But it's not like guaranteed to necessarily get you more than if it's an entirely new thing and you just show it to new people and the people that are already your audience. Like, I don't think there's actually much of a detriment to it other than it can maybe restrict what you can do with that new thing. Because if you start doing a completely new medium and you realize that the storytelling potential is very different to something like a novel, and then you're left going, oh, but I don't want to undermine things I've already built with the novel, but I have to tell a kind of different story since it's a different medium and it lends itself to different types of stories. And then you're kind of like, oh, I don't want to screw up the stuff I already wrote about. Like, now I'm kind of in a bind. That's about the only detriment I can really think of. I don't think it's really, other than that, I don't really think there's anything negative about trying to tie into an existing property.
Because when we had talked about it, the difficulty was, so my novel readers tend to be 50 plus women who, for whatever reason, that happens to be my demographic. And how many of those 50 plus women are reading a superhero novel because they are also comic book fans, which then means they need a new story with a different medium, potentially different characters, because I didn't want to do a situation of, oh God, Star Wars does this and it drives me nuts. If you're a diehard Star Wars fan, you own it all. I mean, Marvel's the way. But I liked the movies. I don't want to read the books to know what happened. I don't want to read the comics to know what happened. Like,
yes, yeah, that can turn into a tangle. And also, if you use some of the same existing characters, you run into the Wolverine problem of like, how are you in both of these stories at the same time? Aren't you busy?
Well, ultimately, the reason I decided that this, well, it was actually you being like, not feeling like. But I was, my adult novels, there's a lot of genocide. Like I nuke all of New England. I destroyed New York City at one point. And having the same visceral level of violence in a visual medium
it's different.
And like, it almost would have had to go to kind of the level of Walking Dead for the sake of, now I'm just showing violence for the sake of violence. There's not like, I can't skirt around it and be like, oh, look, off page, someone just got stabbed.
Yeah. And there, oh, boop, boop.
Hey. So that is one of the problems. And ultimately, it wound up being that I didn't think my existing readers would tie over whatsoever. So that was a massive decision process right there. I'm going to bring up Lawrence King from Constant Hustle to the stage.
How y'all doing?
Hello.
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 We are live and we're talking about the wonderful world of indie-made comics. And you actually have a much different story here because you're not just a creator, you're an owner, right?
Yes, I am. That is correct.
Can you give us a little
comics?
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
can you
go ahead.
tell us a little bit about how it became to be? Your origin story.
Well, I used to write independent films, screenwriter. I still am. And I kind of ran into a few walls in the independent film industry and trying to get things off the ground and trying to get things started. And right around that time, I read an article that came on Facebook, like it was reading my mind, about how to start in independent comics and the things you needed to do. And it had a particular comic called Epic, EPIC, and by Lonnie Lowe for Dark City Comics. And I reached out to him and asked him how he got started in the game and the things that he did and how I could get started in it. And he gave me like I guess you could say a scavenger hunt of things that I needed to do in order to get started. And then he said, when you have all these things done, to get back to me. So I got all those things done. I got back to him, and then the rest is taking off from there. I'm fortunate enough to where I can. I have a great team around me, from my wife, who's the marketing manager, and a friend, another longtime friend that's a branding manager, and just picked up a social media manager that's also our graphic designer. So we've been able to get things up and running. I mean, it's taken a little while to get to where we are right now, and we're nowhere near where we want to be. But we've brought some great people on, like Krishan and things of that nature, who've really really elevated our game and really elevated our brand. So we're just looking to take this thing to the next level.
So Constant Hustle is kind of a unique entity because there's a pretty specific kind of mission for Constant Hustle, right?
Yes, it's changing the faces of superheroes and how their stories are told. So, instead of, and I mean, we're all aware of this, instead of superheroes looking all the Bruce Wayne type and the Clark Kent types and, from back in the day, this is the person that you are. Most of our superheroes were put in the situations they're in, and now they have to adapt to it and their surroundings. But these are people that you see on an everyday basis. It's not somebody who's, come from an alien planet and who's clean and virtuous and, justice is just black and white, because we all know there's a lot of gray in the world. So our superheroes and the stories that they're involved in tend to stay in that part of it. Like we have a superhero group called The Last Line, a superhero team, and that's based off my family. So there's 5 members of that. There's 5 members of my family. All my kids are in it. My wife is in it. Even my mother and father, they're in it as well. So it's trying to give an actual grounded theme to superhero type of, and not all superheroes. They're going to be like a horror comic that's coming out later, things that, but start trying to give it an overall grounded theme and to make the stories relatable.
How would you describe the artistic style? Is there kind of a company theme for that, or is it more independent title based?
It's more independent title based because we can have, like, the artist that we use for The Last Line #1 is not the artist that we use from The Last Line #2. We have another superhero called Avery the Astonishing, and the person we use for the first book is not the person we use for the second book. And then it depends on the creator. The creator may say, hey, he may come to me, or she may come to me and say, I've got a person that I've been working with for X amount of time. I really like the way they do things, and if it works and it's complementing their style of writing and the story that they're telling, then we tend to stay with it. But if I know somebody who I think can do it better, then I say, well, all right, I understand what you mean, but just give me 2 pages of your book. Let me give it to this person, and we'll see if they can do it better than who you have already. So we're trying to really get our legs underneath us.
All right, so I got a question for both of you, because a lot of the people who are going to come across this are going to be people from the superhero fiction community. So before you even get to the creation stage, the script writing, have you, what is something someone should consider with their idea before they even get into the creation stages? Like, what are some of the very early steps that they should be really thinking about before they're like, this is going to happen one way or another?
Please, Amanda, go ahead and answer if you want to.
Well, from an artist's perspective, I'm definitely gonna want things like if you're looking for artists to team up with before you have like a completed script, I'm gonna want to know things like what does your cast list look like? Like who are the characters? What are the descriptions of them? So I get an idea of that. What's the tone of the book gonna be like? So I get an idea if that's something that's even like something I want to sign up for. Because if you're like, yeah, I want to go with like a really dark horror thing, and I'm like, no, but I want to draw like light and happy stories. No, thank you, not for me. Like those are good things to convey ahead of time. Also, this will end up being something that's going to be more relevant to the publisher, but it's relevant to courting artists as well, which is how long of a story are you going to try to tell? Like, are you thinking of doing something that's like a single standalone issue? Are you thinking of doing something that's a 6-issue run? Are you thinking of doing a graphic novel? Are you trying to establish an ongoing series? Like, what is the goal of the story that you want to tell? And you can have like backup goals of like, I really want this to turn into a long-term book, but to start off with, we're just going to do like a 4-issue run. And that's the kind of thing that you want to have like an idea of, even if you don't have a set script yet, so that you know what kind of expectations to present to artists when you're first trying to get them on board.
So, Lawrence, I was saying earlier, Amanda's actually we're working on a project together, and when I first came to her, it was, I've got all these ideas, like I need you to draw them, and she was, whoa, calm down there. I need to know the following, and from my end, coming up with the idea, like it really quickly exploded into this. I got a world, and she's like, whoa, who are your characters? And I realized that this big idea where, in writing a novel, I have 120,000 words. Oh, I get like several hundred words an issue to tell a story. So,
Yeah.
That was my first mistake. So what would you, I make all the mistakes, by the way.
I would say to start with, if you are the creator of the book and this is your first book, I would say have it already in your mind that at best, you're going to break even with your first book. That's at best. You'll probably not break even. But let's say you break even your first book. So already have that in your mind. If you're doing this to make like money quick, then don't even waste your time.
Wrong place to be trying to do that.
Yeah, definitely wrong place. What you have to be thinking of, the indie comic game to me, and I've spoken about this, like my wife and I have spoken, and other members of the team have spoken. It's more of a chess game. You have to think, okay, I'm going to come up with this first book, and it's going to be story heavy because you're explaining everything, you're explaining the world, you're explaining the characters. So let's say, okay, I'm going to come up with this book. I have to pay the artist, who is probably not the inker, who is probably not the person who's going to put flats on the colors, who is probably not the person who's going to end the colors, who's probably not the person who's going to letter the book. And then people think you stop there. No, you need a graphic designer, because somebody has designed the inside cover, the inside of the last cover. They have to design the whole thing because you want it to pop. Our object is definitely a constant hustle. Is our team may be small, our team may be indie, but our books don't look it. You can look at our books, and our books look right. Our books look the same as the big three, not the same as in we look just like them, but our quality of work is like theirs. So when you go to Amanda and you say, hey, I got this great idea, I did the same thing, and all my artists came back, okay, do you have a character design? Nope. Okay, so all right, so that's separate costs. So now you got to pay Amanda to design the characters, and you got to see what her cost is to design the characters. So now you got to add, the cheapest person I've dealt with is $50 to design your character. That's one picture, no colors, looking straight at you. That's it. And maybe one revision. So you figure probably about $100 to $150 a character to design. if you've got this Godfather-like epic in your mind, that's already going to take almost the cost of the first book just to design the characters,
Right.
you know? And then Amanda has to fit this into Amanda's schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So if Amanda's got 3 other books that Amanda's doing, then you're, Jeremy's sitting there waiting every day, checking his email, like, hey, Amanda, no disrespect, but that was this year that I asked for these characters to be designed. You know what I'm saying? So it becomes a thing, because you want to design the world, you want to do this, and we have those same conversations. Everybody wants to design the world. Everybody wants to be involved in 3 or 4 other different projects, but everybody, not so much now with the team we have now, but I was involved in earlier groups where the loudest person is always the person with the least amount of money. You know what I'm saying? So they're like, hey, why don't we do that? And then you're sitting there looking at them like, I don't remember you even chipping in on the last book, let alone coming up with this Secret Wars number 8 type landscape. You know what I'm saying? So when people get involved with us, I always say the same thing. I say, okay, if you have when Krishan came on board, right? First, what she did was I met her through a friend. And we were having a Kickstarter campaign for one of our books. And one of the tiers we have for our Kickstarter campaigns, since we have such amazing artists, is you can, for a certain amount of money, you can become a villain in one of the books. So Krishan came on and she said, okay, I want to be part of the villain tier in one of your books. Now, me being involved in indie for a few years now, and in indie films as well, whenever you get somebody that's even remotely intrigued with your work, that has the resume that Krishan has, you ask, hey, are you interested in maybe editing maybe a couple of the scripts or something like that? So Krishan at first was like, yeah, I'll edit the scripts. And then she was like, I'll edit the scripts if you take a look at this book that I'm trying to make into a so it was that type of vibe. And then once she saw her character made, which I wish I could put up here now, once she saw her character made, she was in love with the character. And then we started talking about bringing, her books, making her books into comics. But if you know Krishan, like I know Krishan, she's got 12 novels of each kind. I'm like, man, it would take like a Stan Lee amount of time to make all of those. So, we're going through that now, trying to whittle down what story you really want to tell. Because, Stephen King could take 8 pages to describe somebody's haircut. You don't have that kind of time. They're going to have to look at it, see the haircut, and then move on from there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're trying to do now. And, having the author involved means you stay true to the material, as well as being true to a time schedule, true to the fact that you eventually want to see this as a book, and you can't make every one of them 45 pages. I mean, I'm sure Amanda wouldn't mind, but the rest of us, you out there driving Uber and picking up budget just to try to pay for it. So
Yeah, Amanda, I feel like I feel like you basically just summed up our relationship pretty well.
Yeah, might have had a few of those conversations.
We started this 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago. It's not like neither of us has been doing anything though, and that's exactly the thing, is that we both also are balancing a lot of other creative pursuits, and so it's like, and we're gonna get back to this comic at some point.
Right.
She's on the panel so that I can publicly guilt her into moving forward. No ulterior motives at all. Okay, so one of the things that I'm really interested in, when we very first started talking, we were talking about my novels, which are, let's not sugarcoat it. They're very X-Men Days of Future Past inspired, like straight up,
Okay.
not even.
Okay.
But those already exist. Why would I want to try and remake Days of Future Past? So when we started talking about, we happened to grow up in the same area, and so we started talking about whittling down a superhero story into this backwoods place in Maine that we grew up. And the story got really personal. It wound up being a coming out story. It wound up being
Right.
like deals with bullying, teen suicide, deals with domestic
Right.
abuse. Like
That's very pertinent to today. So yeah. And see,
and
something like that is going to take even longer because you have to be true and you have to be honest with that story. You can't, you know what I'm saying? You can't just hurry that along so you can get pages done. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
it takes a lot of consideration to make sure that you're
Yeah.
doing the material justice. Yeah.
Right. Right.
and I banged out the first script in a week, maybe. Like it wasn't very long. Like I kind of
Right.
had the idea. Then I took it to my students because I'm also a high school teacher, and I was like,
Uh-huh.
look, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm curious what you guys think about it. And they got their revenge. I've never seen so much red ink on a page. Give a 16-year-old Dominion.
We get to grade Mr. Flag.
But
Yeah.
the story that they had questions, they had motivations, and they were like, look, you're kind of old, so let us explain how kids do it today. And I was like, okay. But it was
Right.
awesome. Is there a certain amount of liberty being an indie publisher, an indie artist, being able to tackle themes or character stories or plots that one of the big three wouldn't necessarily touch on? Like, are there
That's
situations
the beauty of being indie? That is the beauty of being indie. You can touch on any subject. And let's say you touch on the subject, you make a book and it's not say it's not a big seller online. So you have a website and it's not a big seller online. You still have Comic Cons that you can go to. You still have particular groups like Mothers Against Bullies or whatever the case may be, that you could bring that same book to them, or you can just, it could be a labor of love that you can just constantly put out there to the world, because you never know how a book is going to touch your audience. You just know how you feel about that book. So if this book means a lot to you, then regardless of, you could come up with that book and it means a lot to you, and you could come up with something that, you were driving to work one morning, you almost hit somebody in the road, they looked interesting, and you could just come up with a character off that, and then that one sells a bunch. You know what I'm saying? That one sells a bunch, but your personal story doesn't. So you could go as far as putting like a 4 to 5 page like preview of the one that you feel a lot very strongly about in the one that's selling a lot. That way that gets out to some people as well. It's my opinion that being indie, you can touch on a bunch of stuff, and like that group, the last line is my family. So all the pieces of well, not all, but a lot of the pieces of my family's dynamic is going to be a part of it. So like anxiety and coming out to your family and overall depression, all those kind of things, because it's all about forgiveness of their father is what the story's about. And then how a family moves on, looks at the bigger picture, and decides how to move on from there. So yeah, you Marvel and DC and other ones don't touch certain things because it's not sexy enough for them. And indie doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to, you could take a hit on a book and it not be it could be a hit to you monetarily, but you can still put that book in a bunch of contests, script contests, a whole bunch of things, and it can still be good for you, like on the award circuit,
Mm-hmm.
which in turn brings more notoriety to the book itself.
And I do think that when you get to some of these more less sexy themes, when you look at something like Marvel, like, man, when you have a pantheon of thousands of characters and randomly, I give them props for putting it on the cover, but when the X-Men issue came up with the same-sex marriage on the front cover, I was like, oh, great. Either one of them's going to die in the next issue, or we'll never, ever see them again.
We will never speak of this again.
You ticked your box. Next, let's move on.
Right.
And it's kind of what happened. They basically vanished from the plot. So
it's you would be surprised what people want to read and the way people take their enthusiasm for a book from the creator of the book.
Mm.
So if you're at a Comic-Con, Jeremy, or Amanda, I'm sure Amanda knows this already, and you're explaining to people what the book is about, they feed off that energy.
Yeah.
And you may get a couple people that say, you know what, I'll buy it, I'll give it a chance. And then they love the story itself and then want to read more about that story.
Mm.
So that is I don't think there's any such thing as a wasted book. I mean, there's books and storylines I wish we had written better, but that's what next issues are for. So
right.
We wouldn't be talking about Marvel right now if it was Marvel from when it started in the 50s.
Completely different thing. Yeah.
If you look at their first editions, they're not well written at all.
I make my students, so I teach a graphic design course, and we go over comic books, and I make them read the first issue of Walking Dead because there's almost no dialogue.
Right.
And I make them read X-Men #1 from 1963, which is probably the most densely packed thing I've ever seen in my life. And they think because it's a comic, it's going to be a fast read. And they're like, I would rather just go read Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
It's tough to get through. There's a lot.
Right. And I think comics now, based on novels or not, have learned to be able to, you can show more in a frame or a panel with captions than you can in one big word bubble filled with words.
So because of course we're going to have creators checking this out. Once I'm going to go with writer because it's just what I know. Once a writer has a story and they think that it's viable to move forward, what's the next step for that? Like, I've got my script loosely, like, here, like, make me, like, what's that next step? I got lucky knowing Amanda, but otherwise,
right. Well, everybody has to, basically, you have to know or find yourself in Amanda. That's pretty much what it comes down to. You have to if you know someone who has been an artist for a certain amount of time, they're going to come back with the same questions that Amanda came back with. Who is your characters? What world is this from? If I'm not the type of person that does this type of work, I know somebody who does.
Right.
What is your budget? Which is probably the first thing that's going to come out. What is your budget for this book? And then it's gonna go from there. Because normally, if you write your first script, normally it's probably word heavy in description, which may not have to be, and it's probably word heavy in dialogue that you probably don't have to be. So once you write your script, the first thing you should probably do is find an editor to edit said script. Then after you deal with the editor, then you find an Amanda to give the script to.
So if I was gonna edit my script, do I look for like a screenwriting type editor, or do script writers exist in the comic book world? Like, is that
Yeah.
a thing that you hire?
Yeah, and there are comic editors,
Oh, yes.
people who work specifically as comic editors, and a lot of them take on freelance work as well.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep.
Huh.
Yep. That's the thing about working in comics. You'll find people who are professional at what they do. They work for, Marvel or DC. I've got the guy who colored our comic book, Avery the Astonishing. The guy who colored the cover is a colorist for DC. The guy who drew the cover is an artist has done work for Marvel and IDW. He draws G.I. Joe for IDW right now.
Oh.
So, yeah, they're all looking. I shouldn't say all. You find the right ones, they're looking for extra work. The really big ones, that may take a little while longer. But you can normally find them to be able to slide, especially the ones that say commissions available.
Mm-hmm.
Once they say commissions available, you can reach out and contact them about working on your stuff.
The something that really, really just surprised me about the comic book world in general is, if you work for Marvel or DC, like, you probably live in a mansion somewhere, you have all the work you could ask for, you get paid abundance, and you probably get health insurance, because that's what the working world does. And now that I've been to so many comic book conventions, wow.
Yeah.
It seems like it's all a part-time world. So I guess that actually leads into another question. What are numbers like? What is the potential, like, realistically, for, let's say, my first comics coming out? I have a little bit of a following from my novels. Amanda has her following from her comics. Like, what is money going out look like? What does money coming in look like? What are realistic sales numbers? Like, am I selling 100,000 copies, or am I selling 20? Like, I don't know. Like,
so
this is Amanda's job.
I'm sorry. Are you asking the question, or are you?
Yeah, I'm genuinely, because I know people who are going to be watching this are going to be like,
Okay.
"Oh, get rich."
It's your job to temper his expectations right now, Lawrence.
So you sell as many copies as, and I hate to sound corny here, you sell as many copies as your hustle pushes you to sell. So
Okay.
let's say that there are 10 Comic-Cons in your area a year. You should be between 5 to 8 of them a year. There is absolutely no excuse not to be the 5 or 8 of them a year. I have 3 kids. One of them is out the house. The other one's about to be out the house. I have driven from Connecticut to Ocean City, Maryland. I have gone to I don't know how many places selling books at Comic-Cons, because word of mouth is what travels with you.
Mm-hmm.
And a sale at a Comic-Con can mean a sale at a online, which can mean, people who back your Kickstarter campaign, or Indiegogo, or whatever you use. And that's another great way to get the word out, is to do a Indiegogo, right? I said that right. An Indiegogo campaign. That way people can come and see what you got and can contribute and help you out. Like I said, your first book, there's going to be a lot more going out than there is coming in, because once you pay Amanda, which I don't. Amanda, are you one-stop shopping? Do you do everything, pencils, inks, and all that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so once you pay Amanda's price, you still need your graphic designer to design. And most times, the people who you pay to do the sequentials, which is the inside of your book, you normally don't pay them for the cover of the book.
No, I'm not
You get
doing
someone
graphic
else to do
design.
it.
I'm not putting that book together in InDesign. That's not happening.
So you got to get a designer to come up to put the book together, and then you got to get a cover artist to do your cover. And then once you get all that together, you still have to pay for the printing of the book.
Oh yeah.
So it's all part of it. So once you do all that, you still have to, say you print the book. Okay, now you have 50 copies of your book, and you're going to go to so and so Comic-Con to sell 50 copies of your book, right? You got to pay to be a vendor at so and so Comic-Con. If so and so Comic-Con is not near your house, you got to put yourself up in a hotel room. You got to eat while you're there. If you do a one-day average cost of a one-day Comic-Con is between $75 and $100. You got to pay the gas to get there. You got to unload all your stuff. You want to look professional, so you want like a tablecloth with your company name on it. That's $125. You want a couple of banners on both sides with Jeremy flag and a heroic picture of yourself on one side, and then the cover of your book on the other. That's another $125, $150 a piece. So now, once you have all that, then the next one, you're just bringing all your stuff to it. But you got to start. It's
Right.
startup costs that get you. It's startup costs that get you. Now, once you got it all started, and once that's all going and everything like that, then you're fine. But you got to start up first. And you want to use, in indie, you want to use what you have around you. So if you say, hey, kids in my class, I want you guys to take a look at my book. And if you know anybody that's interested, and give them a copy as well. And then you say, Amanda, and artists are some of your best mouthpieces, or people who can spread the word, because Amanda has a following that you do not have. So normally when you bring an artist on, you want to tell them, hey, look.
Oh, uh-oh.
Oh, I think we froze.
Oh dear. Connection interruption.
Does this and another person that does that, they all need to be spreading the word on social media. They all need to be spreading the word everywhere. If they have a website, if Amanda has a website, Amanda needs to be spreading the word there.
So we've talked about going to like comic book conventions, which I completely blame Amanda for.
Jeremy, you need to
Amanda, where do you distribute your book? Because I think that's a big question people have as well.
So my comics, I update as a webcomic. So I update a new page every week. I also distribute it through my Patreon, where everyone gets to see. Oh no, we lost Lawrence entirely.
Oh no!
Oh no! Darn internet!
There he is.
Oh, he's back.
He's back.
Oh,
I'm
back. I'm back.
You're back.
Yes, you're back.
Did I go again?
I think your video is freezing.
Yeah, we're having connection trouble. Oh, that's a bummer. Darn internet.
Right.
I'll finish answering the question. So I distribute it online on my website, one page every week, to keep updating the story. And on my Patreon, I do it a week ahead. And then every so many chapters, I collect it into a graphic novel, like into a trade paperback, where I have like a story arc for each one. And those I distribute through Amazon. I do the Kindle Direct Publishing, which is a print-on-demand service. So someone can buy it from Amazon and have it printed right away and shipped directly to their house. And I can go on and order cases of them at cost to bring to conventions to sell myself, or to sell like on consignment, or sell wholesale to independent bookstores. I also have a publisher that I'm partnered with who distributes ebook copies through their website and through the One Bookshelf platforms of Drive Through RPG, Drive Through Fiction, and Drive Through Comics. So that's the model that I'm using, which is basically a kind of modified version of the old webcomics model of like just constantly update, keep a constant stream so that people can always be engaged and always be seeing something new, and then periodically release it as a collected volume with bonus material so that people also, like, if they want to support you, if they want to buy it just to support you, they can, but they can also get a little like something extra for buying it as a collected work.
What is the likelihood of getting your, because you do it as a graphic novel, not as an individual issue.
Right. Yeah.
What is the likelihood of getting something like that into comic book shops? Because I think that's every
Oh my
geek's
gosh.
dream.
It's really hit and miss. So like you wouldn't be able to get through like a distributor. So what I would have to do would be to basically reach out to individual comic shops and be like, hey, this is my book. I will sell it to you for this much. MSRP is this much. Would you like a few copies? And a lot of comic shops will just say no. Will not even look at it and just say, no, we don't do that. And then a lot of other comic shops will at least look at it. They'll take a copy to preview and then may or may not end up carrying it.
I do think that that is one thing for all the issues that a writer might have coming into the comic book world. If you have indie published a book, we know all about being told, no, you can't be in our bookstore.
Oh, yeah.
That is a expectation that our bar is so low. But the nice thing is you actually get other distribution channels. Like my books aren't in any of those formats. Some authors release chapters at a time on their website or whatnot, but even that I don't think is as common as being able to say, like, here's something pretty to look at,
right?
Not just a bubble of words,
right?
All right, so we are actually kind of running out of time, and Lawrence is back just in time.
Lawrence is back. Oh, and now he's turned into stripes. Oh no!
I can't believe my mic's not working.
Nope, I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you, but you've turned into stripes. Oh, now you're right. Now you're back.
There we go. Lawrence, I was just asking Amanda, where, how do you distribute your comics? Oh, we got a couple minutes. I'm in no rush.
Nah, it's fine.
The live rating that's coming up next is me, so I don't care.
Right. You can be a diva and be late to your own live reading.
Yeah, I mean, as I will.
No, now we can't hear you. Oh no.
No, I can't hear you.
Like you're in a tin can underwater, far away. Like I could just barely make something out.
Oh
no.
Oh no.
Darn internet.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I do have to wrap it up because my tech maven is going to start yelling at me. So Lawrence, can you tell us where can we find Constant Hustle?
Oh no. Oh no.
Okay,
oh, no.
We'll see if he comes back. I got the website up just in case I needed to do it. Amanda, where can we find your stuff?
You can find my comics at ageofnight.com. That's AGEOFNIGHT.com. I'm also on Patreon, so that's patreon.com/ageofnight. You can also follow me on Twitter at Age of Night and Instagram at Amanda Collart.
All right, let's give him another shot. Lawrence, are you there?
Oh, that's so disappointing.
All right, just because I do need to wrap it up. So we've been hearing from Lawrence King from Constant Hustle Comics. You can find Constant Hustle at constanthustlecomics.com. I really do suggest, actually, I suggest for anyone who's watching, Amanda's stuff you can go check out at Age of Night. She is gracious enough to put it up there for you to actually see, which is lovely because I always need something to read. And Constant Hustle, I gotta say, when I first saw Constant Hustle, I discovered them on a Kickstarter, and the artwork was scroll stopping. And for me to say that, it touches into my love of 90s Marvel with the color. It touches, like, I'm looking at them right now, and it's literally everything I love about comics.
We appreciate that. We really, really do. Thank you so much.
Awesome. I can hear you.
Yay.
At the end, of course, you can hear me now.
Right, of course.
Yeah, I was like, I love Constant Hustle Comics. Like, this is why I nagged Krishan to give me your contact info. So, which, weirdly enough, we're all in New England. We're like several hours away from each other. So we got to make this an in-person thing at some point.
Oh yeah, no problem at all.
So Lawrence, you tell us where to find your comics.
You can find us at constanthustlecomics.com. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/constanthustlecomics. CH Comics on Instagram. C Hustle on Twitter. We're a little bit of everywhere. And if we're not there and you think there's somewhere else we should be, you could join our mailing list and tell us what you think, and we'll make efforts to do that as well.
And the beauty of this is their two comic books, their two styles of publication could not be further apart. And they are awesome for so many different reasons. So I love the gamut of visuals.
Thank you so much.
My name is Jeremy Flagg. You can find me at remyflagg.com. I write superhero novels, and eventually, once Amanda returns my phone calls, we might have a comic book someday.
What? Oh, okay.
I'm patiently waiting for all of that work that you've just been lazily not doing anything for the last 2 years.
Right, yeah. Nothing.
This friendship. So, all right, I'm going to end it here. Thank you both for coming on, and have a good evening, everyone. We have one more panel at 7 o'clock, so swing on by.
All right.